Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Today I want to talk about the goddess asteroid Ceres, which will be ingressing into the sign of Aries on the 21st of February. I just have some clearing. Just clearing the space. I did this just before I started, but I'm offering this to you guys as well. Palo Santo, that's right, just forgotten what this is called. Palo Santo, and it's basically a holy stick. It's very beautiful. It's got an incredible scent, and it's just very good for clearing space. If you want to do some meditation or some yoga or some reading, or whatever it is you want to do. Just trying to find my arrow. There it is. Just a really good energetic healer. Okay, so Ceres in Aries. I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and it's quite interesting because 2020, which we know what 2020 was about. There's no need for me to go into that, and we're still experiencing a lot of what was going on in 2020. At the present moment. So things haven't gotten to a point, let's say, where we have complete clarity or certainty about our lives moving forward. Now, in 2020, Ceres was basically transiting through only two signs, and that's not typical, okay, because normally she'll move faster through the zodiac signs, but last year she went retrograde in the sign of Pisces, went right back into Aquarius, went through certain degrees of Aquarius, and then eventually went back into Pisces. She's still in Pisces today, which is the 3rd of February. So we've still got another 18 days or so before she moves into the sign of Aries. So it is always important to look back, because that's how you learn. That's how you learn astrology, by observation and correlation. Doesn't matter what body you are looking at, what planetary body or asteroid. You are observing. The observation correlation method is what's going to teach you the most. You can read a million books, and that's great, and you'll have a large level of vocabulary to share. But if you're not observing things yourself as they present in this reality, in nature, in conditions, in situations, you're never going to really draw the correlation. You're never going to make the connection. You're just going to have intellectual knowledge in your mind about a subject, right? So it's always important to look back at things, whether you're looking at your own chart, in terms of what happened last year for you personally, or 10 years ago, or whenever, or when you're looking at just the collective sort of shifts that are going on relative to the celestial bodies and their movements and their cycles. It's a very important process to to bring into your practice of astrology, right? Even if astrology is just a hobby, you still need to employ this method. So in looking at 2020, the goddess Ceres, which, just very quickly, to remind ourselves, first of all, of the mythology, and also for some people that may not know the mythology of Ceres, it's quite an in-depth story that has quite a few different layers to it, and I'm not going to unpack that right now. So you can find fairly good information online about the mythology of Ceres. So if you're not familiar with it, I really highly recommend you do get familiar with it. Ceres is one of the most literal asteroid goddesses in the chart in terms of what she brings up in our life experience. She's not obscure. It's not hard to read what's going on, to understand what's going on. It's very, very clear cut, literally to the literal point of what's going on. So her story is connected to the planet Pluto and the other asteroid called Persephone, or Proserpina if you're using the Roman name. And so the story is that Ceres' daughter Persephone was abducted by Pluto into the underworld. This created incredible loss, grief, mourning for Ceres, the mother, who's an earth mother, by the way. Her Greek name is Demeter, Demeter. So Demeter and Ceres are the same goddess, although there are different astronomical bodies in the heavens, right? I'm pointing that out because you might look, if you're working with solar fire, you'll see that there's an asteroid called Ceres and there's an asteroid called Demeter, and they'll be in different positions of the zodiac because they're two different asteroids. So just be mindful of those details. So the abduction caused the goddess Earth Mother Ceres to make the earth barren, which is how we get the four seasons: summer, winter, spring, and autumn. The history of how those seasons came about and how they've been named, what they've named, and what they produce and what they reflect and so forth specifically correlates to this mythology of the Earth Mother Ceres, the goddess Ceres. And so her incredibly deep grief and loss and pain and suffering and sadness of the abduction of her daughter, as I said, was the result of making the earth barren. And essentially, humanity would have starved to death if other gods did not interfere. And the other god that interfered was Jupiter, who's Pluto's brother, to negotiate with Pluto to allow Persephone to live in the underworld, but also live in the upper world with her mother as well. So there was some deal negotiation that went on that eventually enabled Persephone to live in both worlds. So Persephone is quite a powerful symbol relative to our conscious construction of reality, you could say, and experiences, and the very deep unconscious components within us. That's what the underworld, if you like, where the world that Hades, Pluto rules, the underworld, is, it's the same thing as the unconscious within us. It's all symbolic. So it's about understanding the symbolism of the different mythologies. So eventually she was, as I said, allowed to spend time with her mother, and she also remained to be Pluto's wife. So she became the queen of the underworld. So that's part of the myth, okay? And the point to that whole story is that Ceres is the mother principle, the Mother Earth principle. So therefore she represents what sustains us, what nurtures us in our physicality, in our emotionality, in our spirituality. Every component of our existence and our beingness, from the point of view of it being sustained and nurtured through the feminine, is what Ceres represents. So because of the abduction of the daughter of Persephone, that abduction has become, you could say, the dysfunction that occurs in the experience of nurturance for people. Now, see, if there's so many levels to this, because if you go back to pre-patriarchal days, then the nurturing principle, which is Ceres, was not fragmented or disjointed or disrupted or damaged. It was operating through what would be called natural law, which is the law of the earth and Mother Earth. And that's going, really, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, going way back, where the patriarchal systems had not come into play yet. As I said, there's many layers, it's very complex, but it is important to understand the distinction between natural law, earth, working with the earth's law, nature, in other words, which is something that has been lost, over many years. Um, because the way you could say that the way the collective um, experiences Ceres relative to where Ceres is in your natal birth chart and her cycle, her movement, which is basically every 4 years, and that's pretty much the case with most asteroids. They run through the whole zodiac every 4 years, right? That's their general sort of orbit. So the point I'm trying to make here is that in terms of our current lifetime, most certainly, and even previous lifetimes as well, you could say, we've sort of, I think we've been experiencing Ceres largely through the patriarchal system of things. And what happens then is that because the nurturing principle, the feminine, was damaged, interrupted, fragmented, distorted, it becomes the experience of Ceres in your chart will reflect where the need for nurturance and the experiences around that and the lack of nurturance, if that was the case for you, it'll just show you where things have gone wrong relative to what sustains you and what nurtures you. And yes, of course, it's got to do with, family, your childhood, early environment, because all that stuff is what sets the foundation of, what's going to be developed for better or for worse, and evolve. So Ceres, in other words, certainly through our lifetime, this lifetime, is largely experienced through this patriarchal system, which then brings in the inherent fragmented level of nurturance, which becomes, well, actually, that's the second part, which I'll get to in a minute. So going back to 2020, Ceres being in the sign of Pisces and Aquarius, the way I see it, relative to the nature of events, because Ceres corresponds to loss, grief, pain and suffering, mourning, relative to something called COVID-19, there has been, according to what's been told to us, a lot of losses. A lot of people have died. Okay, so that's pretty much Ceres in Aquarius, and in a nutshell, and Ceres in Pisces. And I said this last year as well, in terms of a collective experience, has really been our experience of the loss of reality as we knew it. Because even after this thing called COVID-19, and then this other thing called the strand or the mutation strand or whatever label they've put on it, even after this whole thing has settled or has completely shifted into a completely different level, our life moving forward is not going to be the same. It never will be. I think that's pretty obvious to most people. So there's Ceres in Pisces reflecting the loss of dreams, the dreams that we held. Pisces, the archetype Pisces correlates to dreams, the dreams that we that we have when we go to sleep and the dreams that we have in our waking day life. The matters of life that stimulate that level of intuitive inspiration, the dreams that we have in our mind, or that we journal, or that we hope for. A lot of that it's gone, it's lost. But I guess that the thing to remember is that with Ceres, while she reflects a journey and a process through grieving the loss of something or someone, she holds a very similar vibration to Pluto, in the sense of she basically corresponds to loss and renewal, which is the same thing with Pluto. When you go through a Pluto journey, you cannot go through a Pluto journey without something dying inside you or in your life. It's just not possible. And Ceres acts in the same way as well. She will bring up a great loss in our personal journey or collectively, but with the absolute promise and hope of renewal at the end of that journey as well. It's very much a death rebirth experience, in other words. So she's a couple of weeks away from ingressing into Aries, and that's really very significant for many, many reasons. And some of those reasons are, well, first of all, Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, masculine, yang, and cardinal. So it's a cardinal sign, masculine, yang sign, fire sign, first sign of the zodiac. It's the birth of all things, isn't it? We know that the start of the zodiac reflects the birthing of the entire zodiac. That's where it begins, at Aries. It goes right around to Pisces. So Ceres is coming back to begin an entirely brand new cycle when she enters the sign of Aries. And in evolutionary astrology, particularly the cardinal signs, which correspond to Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, which are the first house, the fourth house, the seventh house, and the 10th house, when those houses in the chart are activated, or those signs in the zodiac are activated, they do correspond to a new cycle, an evolutionary, quite a profound evolutionary cycle taking place, beginning. It's always a beginning point. That's why those four angles of the chart, the cross of matter, ascendant, descendant, MC, IC, that cross of matter is it's like it's like 1,000,000% voltage, in terms of the frequency and the energy that is held in that cross of matter, those particular points. So it is the same in a sense with those signs when they are activated. That's what cardinal energy is about. It's about energy sort of coming from within and being poured out, beginning a very a very important cycle, a new birthing. And it couldn't be it just couldn't be more new than when it begins at Aries, right? So it's going to be very interesting to observe, really, over the next 4 years, the journey of Ceres through the zodiac relative to the future moving forward, because we are stepping into new paradigms, new realities, new way of life. That's, as I said before, it's totally clear to all of us. So this ingress of Ceres into Aries is just the birthing of that next 4 year cycle relative to the state of affairs as they are at the moment, and as they will be developing and unfolding over the next 4 years relative to the archetype or the symbol or the goddess Ceres. So there are some interesting things in her journey along the way while she transits through the sign of Aries. She won't be in Aries for a really super long time because, as I said, normally she moves through the signs, in a few weeks' time. It just so happened, and that's not a coincidence, that she spent all that time in Pisces and Aquarius from last year until now. She's still in Pisces, which, as I said, corresponds to our dreams and the reality before us, and just how we've had to really come to terms with the losses that have occurred, which can include our own certain dreams we've had about what we thought were our dreams, at least, or what we wanted our dreams to be relative to our life, right? And how we are progressing forward. Um, so going back into Aries, oh, that's what I wanted to say. It was just floating there and it just came back. And I'm glad it came back. In Pisces, the other thing to really consider as well, because you're still in Pisces, is that the the nurturing component to Ceres through Pisces is very much about our own spiritual connection and relationship to divine source, creation, to all things, God, goddess, whatever name you want to put on that, doesn't matter. Just your own sense of your spiritual life, your spiritual connection or connections, the nurturing of that, and nurturing that into others as well, because Pisces is an archetype that corresponds to giving. It's when we're dealing with Pisces at a more transcended level, at least, we are working with God, goddess, as a conduit, as a vehicle for that source to come through so that we can literally just be the vehicle of that expression for the mind of God, for the intentions of God. So we are we're a servant, you could say. Now, a lot of people won't be comfortable with that word, that language. That's okay. I can understand that. Um, but I'm not talking about being some sort of human slave. I'm talking about being in service of spirit. That's got nothing to do with being a human slave. It's like black and white, right? So just want to be clear on that. So by nurturing our own spiritual self and our own spiritual connections in life, while Ceres is in Pisces, we are we are serving by doing that, because we're allowing ourselves to nurture those components within ourselves, within our own life. I mean, the more we can nurture the aspects within us that may be suppressed, fragmented, broken, that haven't received the appropriate nurture, obviously the more we're going to heal and renew ourselves, right? And Ceres is about renewal. So moving into Aries, then, as I said, it's the beginning of a new cycle. It's a cardinal sign, it's masculine, ruled by Mars. And originally I was doing some reading in some books, and Mars has, it's got this reputation of violence, anger, war, aggression, abuse, etc., etc. And it's really derived from the Roman Empire sort of days, right? Relative to history. It's a long story. It's quite complex, but if you do a bit of research and reading, you'll discover that the original um, the original understanding or embodiment of Mars was about our sexual energy and it still is that too. But it was more about the absolute natural, instinctual response to being alive, to being born. It's pre-thought, pre-everything. Aries is the first sign. It's that baby that is born. As soon as it's born, that's an Aries moment. And certainly when the infant, when that baby comes out of the mother, it's a tiny little baby. It doesn't have an ego. It doesn't have an identity. It doesn't have language. It doesn't have any of those things. It doesn't have perceptions, ideas, judgments, rules, regulations, etc., etc. It's just kind of free floating. It's still very connected to Pisces at those stages. That's why when you see some babies when they're born, and even in the first year of life, you look at their eyes and there's such a strong presence of the soul and the aura and energy and frequency of the soul that's still so it's just so pure when they are so little. And it's as the child starts to develop and take on an identity through the parental influences relative to culture, nationality, religion, um, location of birth, etc., etc., then all those layers are what start to create conditions in terms of what one believes or who they believe they are, and so forth, right? But that spark of life force as it first emerges into beingness, that's Aries. It's so pure and raw and innocent. So Ceres taking us through Aries from the 21st of February to the 8th of May 2021. She will form a conjunction to Chiron almost immediately when she ingresses into Aries. I'll bring up the chart and show you that in a moment. And by the 25th of April, she's gotten to a point in Aries where she's about, well, I'll bring it up and show you. It's about 25, 26, 27 degrees of Aries. And there's a few days there that I think are going to be very challenging, very testing for the collective, and also can be very personally empowering in terms of transforming our own inner fragmented levels of the Aries component of us, because we all have Aries in us. You may not be an Aries, but Aries is in your chart, so it's somewhere there. It represents some area of your life. When you're looking at your birth chart, for instance, and you've got a planet in a house, the house is absolutely primary, and the sign that the planet is in is almost secondary. Almost. That could be argued, right? But the point being that the location of the house is so primary because that's based on your time of birth. The sun is going to be in Aries for quite some time, isn't it? And Mercury is going to be in Aries for quite some time, and so will all the other planets, depending on their own orbit, their own cycle, right? So Aries will be there for a month in the sun, etc., etc. But when you're talking about your birth chart, your time of birth could be incorrect by 5 minutes, and that could put a whole bunch of stuff, planets that you've got in one house, it could move them over into another house. And that's just, we're talking about 5 minutes on the clock time, real time. So that's why the location of planetary bodies in the chart are so extremely important. and speak to that area of life, that experience of life, or those experiences of life. So anyway, Ceres in Aries, yeah, she's going to form a square to Pluto from the 25th of April to around about the 2nd of May. So around about a week. Now, why is that particularly important? The reason it's particularly important is because when you see a Ceres Pluto aspect, whether it's in your own chart or whether it's a transit happening from a collective perspective, well, that immediately just activates the whole archetypal mythological story of Pluto and Ceres and everything that that myth entails. I've seen a lot of Ceres Pluto aspects in people's charts through the years, and you could almost just get the whole life story of that individual just from looking at Pluto and Ceres in their birth chart without looking at anything else. That's how powerful it is. So well worth paying attention to when you notice that. In terms of the collective experiences, I think that's going to be a tough time. And obviously it will, the magnitude of that will differ in locations on Earth, I would suspect. So obviously it's going to be worse in some places than others. And that's simply just because of the intensity of things that are being triggered in different countries. The USA is being triggered so significantly because of all the different things that are happening to the national chart of USA. Pluto return, they've got solar arc Pluto on the midheaven happening, I think it's this year. There's so many things happening to the national chart of USA, which is activating the chaos that is still, really a real thing for people there in terms of the loss and the uncertainty and the crashing of things and businesses and money and relationships and everything. Um, and here in Australia, where everything is practically back on track in terms of everything's open. Yes, there's still the mask wearing. Um, and yes, there's a big push for vaccines. And I'm not going to talk about that publicly because there's just so many platforms that are censored, and you can all choose to make up your own mind about any of those things. I have my own personal views, and I'll just keep it at that. So there's a real contrast, for example, with what's happening in Australia and what's happening in the US relative to the conditions of how things are appearing at the moment. So, Ceres square Pluto, that week there looks to me to be a very testing and challenging week. I expect some pretty serious, heavy duty things to take place at that time. But just Ceres and Ceres forming a conjunction to Chiron, which is almost immediately when she ingresses into Aries, because Chiron's the very early degrees at Aries at the moment, transiting wise. That's going to be a very important time let's just bring up the chart for that. So I'll just quickly share my screen, and so let's see. So there's the ingress chart for Ceres into Aries, and that is the 21st of February 2021. That's Australian Eastern daylight savings time for us because we're still on daylight savings here. So for most of you, it'll be on the 20th of February, okay? All right, so there's Ceres right there. Let me just grab some tools to assist. I really need to explore these tools because I'm sure there's better options than the ones that I'm sort of choosing. But anyway, kind of leave that aside for now. Okay, so I like this one. There you go. It's highlighted it. Ceres in Aries, 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 20th or 21st of February. You can see there Chiron is right next to her at 6 degrees of Aries, forming and applying conjunction. So when I animate this chart, which I will just to demonstrate to you, so I'll animate it one day at a time. So let's just keep going, keep going. You can see Ceres has now moved to 2 degrees of Aries, for instance. If we keep going, 3rd of March, and she's only at 3. So personally, I think that the conjunction between Ceres and Chiron will be activated from the time she gets into Aries, because the conjunction is just, it's incredibly close. So we could say from the 20th of February, right? Right through until, there you go, they're both at 7 degrees now. Chiron, my highlighters have moved over, so don't worry about those. There's Ceres, there's Chiron, both at 7 of Aries. That's on the 12th of March. So in effect, then, we're loosely saying that the energy of Chiron and Ceres in the sign of Aries, that conjunction, those two bodies coming together and emanating their frequencies together, is activated from the 20th of March, 20th of February rather, to the 12th of March. That's a fair amount of time if we're talking about consciously working with this energy. I mean, it's still going to present things whether people are consciously working with it or not. And look, this has got so much to do with renewal and healing of our own instinctual nature, trusting our instincts. It's got to do with autonomy. Aries is about autonomy, instincts, gut instincts, freedom, the freedom to act without being suppressed and stopped, inhibited, restricted, and so forth. But we have to bring some wisdom. We have to bring some wisdom into the way in which we act as well, because we don't live in a bubble, and we're not the only person on this earth plane. So we have to live in some kind of unison and understanding of all the different levels and things that create this reality. So we have to employ wisdom. But I think this could bring up some pretty deep sore spots for certain individuals wherever Chiron and Ceres is transiting in their chart. That's a pretty powerful combination there. And both have to do with some kind of pain. Chiron corresponds to the pain of rejection and not being accepted. And Ceres corresponds to the pain of loss and grief and suffering. So they're both archetypes and symbols that bring up some pretty heavy, painful material. So that may not sound great, but it can be incredibly powerful in a transforming way, because Ceres corresponds to renewal and Chiron corresponds to healing. So this transit here, in other words, might, depending on where it is in your chart, you may be having a Ceres return because you've got Ceres in Aries natally. You may be having a Chiron return because you've got Chiron in Aries natally, in which case you're somewhere between 48 and 51 years of age. The Ceres and Chiron conjunction will be in a particular place in your own birth chart. you need to note that, make a note of that, have a look at where that is, because the house location is going to bring up the field of experience where this energy and this frequency will be activated, and how therefore you can work with it and what you need to be aware of. And I mean, it's great knowing this in advance, because if you don't know this, and let's just say that Chiron and Ceres happens to be transiting your seventh house. If you're in a relationship, that could possibly end a relationship. I'll be totally blunt and honest about it. On the other hand, it could bring up material within the relationship of the two people of matters that have been denied and suppressed, that have not been acknowledged, validated, understood, explored, nurtured, loved, and so forth. And so here comes this opportunity now with this energy for these things, this material to be activated. And if the two people are aware and are conscious, they can create magic out of this in terms of how they can be renewed and healed. And if the two people are not aware of it, and they're not necessarily very aware individuals, and they have this transit come through their seventh house, it could be quite terrible, pretty devastating actually. So it does. There's so much. There's so much value in having awareness. And I'm not talking about looking at every single transit and sitting there going, oh, what's that going to do? What's that going to do? What's that going to do? What's that going to, because that's just Gemini, right? I'm talking about using your own intuitive faculty as well, and looking at yourself and your life circumstances and how something, might be mirroring that to you at the moment or in some time in the near future. So trusting your own intuitive faculty, trusting your own instincts, and Ceres in Aries is all about trusting your instincts, as is Chiron in Aries. So there is some process and journey for us while she's in the sign of Aries that can take us through some healing work with the Chiron energy there for the first couple of weeks. There's going to be something very intense that occurs 25th of April to the 2nd of May. That's going to be quite a profound level of transformation on the planet. It's not going to be taken well. It's not going to be easy, but it will lead to some kind of necessary transformation. That's what I'll say about that. So, yeah, just have a think about Ceres in Aries for yourself relative to where she's transiting. I just want to read a couple of things. So, see, Ceres in Aries inspires all the Aries qualities, right? Which are so beautiful. Every archetype has beautiful qualities. I'm not just saying this about Aries. Every archetype has magical sort of qualities. They're just all very different, right? But the beauty of Aries is the innocence. See that there's nothing that's attached to Aries. There's nothing that's molded, defined, attached, etc. It's just raw energy at its purest level. And that's what inspires people. Remember, I've said this before, the fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, fire inspires in spirit. So what do fire signs do? They create this fire in your belly and get you moving, get you enthusiastic, and give you confidence, confidence and courage. That's what fire signs do. So the Ceres in Aries can be a journey where we ourselves actually nurture that part within us, that Aries part within us that needs to feel nurtured. Which part is that? The part that needs to have more courage, that needs to get more in touch, with their instincts, their gut instinct, needs to be more connected with their own autonomy and the masculine principle within, regardless of gender. Regardless of gender, we all have the masculine and feminine archetypes existing within us, all of them. It doesn't matter what gender we are. And now with the with the world evolving forward and the matter of gender, which is such a sensitive topic relative to transgender and so forth, we have these new ways of understanding the different experiences of how people identify. And so there's no right or wrong or black and white with that. It's very fluid, and it's very Aquarius actually. So all those levels are important, because when you come back to healing, I'm sure you've seen that long enough now. When you come back to healing and nurturing the Aries qualities, we've got to get outside of a mental space that makes the judgment of Aries is masculine and we associate that to a male gender, because we all have the masculine and feminine within. And the problem has been largely, in my opinion, the suppression of the feminine for such a long time through the patriarchal systems, both in men and women, as a matter of fact, if we want to talk about gender, and the fragmentation and damage that has caused to the collective humanity, which has resulted in the angry, aggressive side of Mars, who's seen as the god of war. Whereas in its purest form, it corresponds to our primal instincts of being. So I'll leave it there, and hoping that what I've shared with you inspires you, touches something in you, and was interesting. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. There's lots of things coming up. We've got two solar eclipses this year, and both belong to a great family of the Ceres cycle. So that's really good news, because last year those eclipses were pretty much a write-off. They were very difficult eclipses belonging to very difficult family of eclipses. So this year's looking much more hopeful from that level. So yeah, look, I'll be back soon. There's heaps more. Also, I will be offering my next class this month. It was supposed to be in January, but January was just a bit kind of like this. As a matter of fact, I've upgraded all my technological software, from computers to astrology software to everything. And it's taken me months to even get to all of that, to find the right things that I needed, etc., etc. But just as Mercury was about to go retrograde in the sign of Aquarius, I've lost all my astrological files, all of them. And I was crying for 2 days nonstop, like completely heartbroken. And I don't know if I'll be able to salvage them. So that's just as Mercury was going retrograde in the sign of Aquarius, which has got to do with technology, astrology, Mercury, files, information, Mercury retrograde, the loss of information, files, data, etc. So never underestimate just how powerful Mercury can be as he's about to station retrograde, because it can be freaking chaos, and it has been. So the next class I will offer will be this month. I can't say what date it will be just yet. I need to work that out. But I have the emails of many of you, and if there are any of you that are new to my channel or have not heard me speak about teaching classes before, you can email me. My email information is in the description below this video. And yeah, I'll be in touch with all of you very soon. But if you're interested in classes, just shoot me an email so that I can put you onto my group kind of student list thing. All right, guys, much love, much blessings, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye.